Speaking of January 6th, I want to kind of just do a segment where we break down why January 6th is so significant. Now, I've been hearing since a couple days ago was 2 years to the day from January 6th. And so a lot of people were talking about it. I heard the right-wing backlash kind of being, oh, why are you still talking about this? It's not that big of a deal. You're so obsessed with January 6th. And so I wanted to take this as an opportunity close to 2 years out from January 6th to explain why are progressives or even just centrists, hopefully reasonable Republicans, so caught up on January 6th, if you want to use that wording. Why is it so important to be talked about as often as possible, no matter how far out we get over the next few years? And I want to break it down to three D's, okay? It's democracy, delusion, and division. Those are going to be the three words we're going to use to kind of walk through why January 6th is so important. So democracy is obvious, but let me kind of dive into it. Not only on January 6th were the supporters of Donald Trump trying to prevent the lawful election process and prevent Joe Biden from becoming president, it represented what was going on in the buildup to January 6th, and it got manifested in the supporters of Trump's actions. But Trump's actions are so important to be discussed, and that was not just rallying up the crowd, but what was rallying up the crowd? The lies about the election. And behind the scenes, Trump was using those same lies to attempt to keep himself, or using those lies to justify taking action to keep himself in power despite losing the election. So January 6th, people will always say, oh, it's not as deadly as people said, or, oh, you know, other things have happened that have been way more damaging to property or whatever it might be. That's not what we're saying. What has to be focused on when you look at January 6th is what it meant, what it represented. And what it represented was a current president through multiple means attempting to stay president despite losing the election. And if that had worked, boom, we would have lost our democratic process because a president would have held power who wasn't that was chosen by the people, by our election process. And so the lies that Donald Trump was telling without evidence, as we've gone through extensively on this show, were being used to rile up his supporters to try to prevent the certification of Joe Biden's win. And behind the scenes, those same lies were being used to justify him trying to keep himself as president. And that is one of the most blatant examples of an assault on the United States' democratic process. Other people, every single other person in a similar situation as Donald Trump, as he was in 2020, the past historical examples of presidents or just candidates who lost either re-election or an election bid, they conceded and they did not try to grab onto power if the people did not give it to them. Donald Trump was a rare example. He was the exception of trying to break that tradition, and he did break that tradition, and luckily he wasn't able to succeed in staying president, but he was trying to. And so that is so crucial. I think it would be justified to bring that up every single day, every single time American politics is discussed, because that is how you lose your democracy in a country. And it was attempted to be done by Donald Trump. Luckily, again, I say he failed, but it is so crucial that we make that connection, because January 6th was the manifestation of the assault on our democracy that was going on both before January 6th, during and after. And that's what that represents. Second D, delusional. Now, or delusion. This is not a word I'm trying to use just to insult the far right, the MAGA base in the United States. This is a genuine conversation that has to be had when you look at January 6th. January 6th was, and I'll keep using this word because it's exactly what I'm trying to say, the manifestation of the delusional nature of some of the lies that were being told, and the way that so many now in our country have gotten detached from reality. And I think it has to do a lot with social media and many people, adult, human American people, their inability to get the correct information because of the vast nature and unregulated nature of social media. And so they've gone down these rabbit holes and are believing all sorts of wild things. And so when we look at January 6th, that should be a huge siren, a huge blaring example that should raise our awareness to the fact that something's failed in this country. Something's broken because enough people in the country believed completely baseless claims of election fraud and the election being stolen, that so many believe that enough were willing to go and attack the Capitol. So again, it's not just about the physical thing that occurred on that day. It's also about what that means, that so many people have, by one form or another, been detached from reality and now see the world in a way that it just is not. And so that isn't just the far right. I have met plenty of people who happen to have more similar political views to me, but are also as misinformed. They've just happened to fall down a left-wing rabbit hole. And so it's important for all of us to be humble and recognize it takes work to stay informed and understand what is credible, what's not credible, what is reality, what's not, what is fact, what's not. And so many, since we're talking about it now, will keep it focused on the MAGA base. We're not able to tap into those things. And instead, we're convinced of lies that led to January 6th. But that problem still remains. January 6th is long over, but that problem still remains. And so many people are still detached from reality in that way. So you have democracy delusion and finally division. Because so many people are honestly more bought into the idea that the other side in the United States is evil than anything else. When a lie came along that was told to them that confirmed that in the best way possible, meaning what's more enraging and horrible in a political process, a democratic political process, than the other side being responsible for stealing an election and violating that democratic process? Well, that story is the best example. Nothing is more enraging than that. And so because people are so divided in the United States, and it's not all manufactured, some of it is, but there are real issues that we are divided on for good reason, and it should be known that that's the case. And then some of it is media dividing us and all those different things that we know. Because people have so much hatred for the other side, whenever you had someone who didn't want Trump to have lost, who was detached enough from reality to believe wild things, and kind of, in the weirdest sense possible, would like to believe that the other side did something horrible like this because it would be confirming their belief about the character of the other side, of course they were going to buy into those lies. And so you have democracy, delusion, and division. January 6th represents the divided nature of the United States, and when one of the sides was so ready to buy into the worst story about what went on in the election because they believe the other side could do something like that. They're evil enough to try to steal an election, and despite not having evidence provided to them that actually happened, their love for Trump and their hate for the other side made them want to believe so badly that it did occur, and so they believed those claims. So I hope that makes a lot of sense. I know many in my audience agree that January 6th is a huge deal, but I wanted to put down kind of in one segment why that's the case and why I will continue to bring up January 6th, even as it becomes more and more in the past, because it's not just about what occurred that day. So often people go, well, during this particular riot that happened a different time, there was more property damage or more of this, more deaths here, whatever. It's about, yes, the devastation that occurred on that day, the cops that were beat, and the lives that were threatened, and the death that occurred on that day. That matters. But what will ripple throughout time in the United States is what that meant, what January 6th represented. And that is so important to focus on. Hopefully you agree. Let me know what you think. Luke P. Beasley on Twitter.